These three case studies demonstrate that it is sometimes a very slow progression from a positive autoantibody result to established type 1 diabetes. Case study 1 is a 33-year-old male who works as a painter and decorator. He felt unwell a few months ago and Googled his symptoms. This led him to buy a blood glucose meter online and to reduce the amount of carbohydrate in his diet. He saw his GP a couple of months later and had an HbA1c, which was 75 millimoles per mole. His BMI was normal, so the GP checked his GAD antibodies as he wasn't presenting as a typical new diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. GAD autoantibodies were positive, so the GP ordered further autoantibody testing, and his IA2 was also positive. He is currently eating 150 grams of carbs per day, his fasting blood glucose is under 6 millimoles per litre, and his HbA1c is 42 millimoles per mole. He has no amber or red flag symptoms. If you were looking after this person, what action would you take? Ongoing monitoring was arranged at his local diabetes service, so he had an annual review at which his autoantibodies and C-peptide were checked. His C-peptide was 415 picomole per litre. He was provided with a ketone meter and education about amber and red flags, so he can avoid becoming seriously unwell. His CGM over 14 days, April 30th to May 13th, showed his average glucose as 6.0 millimoles per litre and his glucose management indicator, GMI, as 5.9%, 41 millimoles per mole, with a time in range of 95%. His CGM data over 30 days, May 2nd to May 31st, showed average glucose had risen slightly to 6.6 millimoles per litre, and GMI had risen to 6.2%, 44 millimoles per mole. The following 30 days, June 1st to June 30th, showed another rise in both average glucose and GMI, with time in range holding steady at 95% in May and falling to 89% in June. Interestingly, his time spent in the high and very high range increased from 4% in May to 11% in June. A slow change is evident, but so far he remains asymptomatic. Case study 2 is a 36-year-old learning disability nurse who was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes 11 years ago following an episode of glandular fever. In January 2022, she started going to the gym, and by September that year, her BMI had reduced very slightly from 33.5 to 33.4, and she commenced GLP-1 therapy. Her HbA1c ranged between 38 to 42 millimoles per mole, and her BMI reduced to 26.2. She had a C-peptide check, which was 897 picomole per litre. But she had 3 positive autoantibodies, GAD, IA2 and ZNT8, which meant she had a lifetime risk of developing type 1 diabetes of 80%. If you were looking after this person, what action would you take? It was agreed that she would not have CGM all the time, as this would contribute to her anxiety, but 6 monthly HbA1c checks were scheduled. She was provided with a ketone meter and education about amber and red flags so she could avoid becoming seriously unwell. Case study 3 is a 57-year-old man who was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes in December 2023. His HbA1c was 160 millimoles per mole, and he had a BMI of 27.7. His blood test was positive for 3 autoantibodies, and his C-peptide was 350 picomoles per litre. So he was commenced on insulin with metformin, 500 milligrams once a day. Initially, he needed 8 units of basal insulin twice a day and around 5 units of quick-acting insulin with each meal. At his 6-month review, he was taking only 2 units of basal insulin twice a day and using ratios of 0.5 units of quick-acting insulin to 10 grams of carbs. His HbA1c was 43 millimoles per mole. His time in range was 96%, with 4% time in hypo range. He had changed his diet significantly, and his BMI was 25.9. If you were looking after this person, what action would you take? Checks for suspected malignancy were undertaken, and fortunately, no malignancy was found. He stopped his quick-acting insulin but remained on 1 unit basal insulin BD. His C-peptide was 2017. He remained on CGM in case it became necessary to reintroduce QA insulin, and he received a ketone meter and education about amber and red flags so he could avoid becoming seriously unwell. After 18 months, insulin was discontinued and metformin increased as he still had not developed established type 1 diabetes. 2 years after his diagnosis, he's taking metformin 1 gram once a day. His glucose management indicator, or GMI, is 5.9% or 41 millimoles per mole, and he has 80% time in range with a BMI of 28.6. Thank you for watching this video. Please return to the main module